The last light of day bled across the Wyoming sky when Silas Crenshaw heard the knock. He froze mid-motion, claw still pressed against the barrel of his Winchester. 7 years alone in this cabin had taught him many things. One of them was this: nobody knocked on his door after sundown. Not neighbors, not travelers, nobody with good intentions. The knock came again, weak, desperate, the sound of someone running out of strength. Silas set the rifle down quietly and drew his Colt from the holster hanging on the chair. The weight of it felt familiar in his palm, comforting. He had carried the same pistol through 3 years of war, through mud and blood and smoke. It had never failed him. He crossed to the door in 4 silent steps and listened. Breathing, ragged, fast, someone fighting to stay conscious. He pulled the latch and opened the door. A woman collapsed across his threshold. She was young, Apache from the look of her, black hair matted with sweat and ice, deerskin clothing torn in a dozen places, bare feet cracked and bleeding, the skin around them gray from frostbite. But it was her eyes that stopped him. Dark, wild, the eyes of a hunted animal that had finally run out of ground. She lifted her head, and when she spoke, her voice cracked like breaking ice. "I want to give birth to a white baby. Please let me in." Silas had heard strange things in his life. Dying men confessing sins, soldiers screaming for mothers long dead. But this was different. This was desperation wrapped in words that made no sense. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. He stepped back, letting the warmth from the cabin spill outward, and she crawled inside on hands and knees. He closed the door against the cold and dropped the heavy bar into place. Only then did he see the wound. A deep gash ran along her left forearm, the flesh parted like split wood. Blood still seeped from it, slow and dark. She had been running with that wound for hours, maybe longer. Silas holstered the Colt and moved to his supply chest. Needle, thread, the good whiskey he kept for emergencies. He knelt beside her without ceremony. "This will hurt," he said. She nodded once. He poured whiskey over the wound. She made no sound, but her jaw tightened until the muscles stood out like rope. Silas threaded the needle and began to stitch, his movements quick and practiced. He had done this before. On himself. On men whose names he had forgotten. "How far behind?" he asked while he worked. "Half a day." Her voice was steadier now, though pain edged every word. "Maybe less. 4 men. Guns?" "1 rifle, old. Rest carry bows and tomahawks." Silas calculated. His Winchester could reach out to 200 yards with accuracy. Bows were deadly at 50, maybe 60 at most. He had the advantage of range. But 4 men meant 4 directions. One mistake meant death. He tied off the last stitch and sat back on his heels. "That thing you said at the door," he said. "Explain." She looked down at her bandaged arm, then at the fire crackling in the stove. For a long moment she said nothing. "My name is Kaya," she finally said, "daughter of Running Deer. He was the medicine man of our band." Was. Silas noted the past tense but didn't interrupt.
"I want to have a white
Stone
baby.
Bear
Please
wanted
let
me
me
as
in."
his 4th wife. He is
Come in,
54
but don't
winters.
cause trouble.
I am 20. Her voice carried no emotion, only facts. "I refused. My father stood with me. He said a woman's heart cannot be claimed like territory." She paused, and when she continued, her voice dropped lower. "Stone Bear killed him, in front of the whole tribe. Cut his throat while I watched." Silas felt something cold settle in his chest. He had seen cruelty in the war, seen men do things that haunted him still. But there was something in the flatness of her tone that told him she had not yet processed what she had witnessed. "I ran that night," Kaya continued. "Stone Bear sent his nephew to bring me back. Red Hawk. I stabbed him when he caught me. He lived, but I wounded his pride more than his body." "So this isn't about marriage anymore," Silas said. No, this is blood debt. They will not stop until I am dead. Or they are. Silas stood and walked to the window. Outside, darkness had swallowed the land. The moon hung low, giving just enough light to see the outline of hills against the sky. He owed this woman nothing. He could give her food, let her rest, send her on her way at dawn. That would be the smart choice, the safe choice. But then he thought of Sarah, his wife, dead 7 years now, along with their daughter Emma. 3 years old, blonde hair like sunshine, a laugh that could fill a room. They had died of fever while he was 20 miles away, buying medicine that arrived too late. He had failed to protect them. He had carried that failure every day since. Get some sleep, he said without turning from the window. I'll keep watch. You're letting me stay? For now. She didn't argue. Exhaustion pulled at her like chains. Within minutes, her breathing slowed, and she slept on the floor near the stove, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like smoke and solitude. Silas sat in the dark with his rifle across his knees and waited for dawn. The sun rose pale and cold, painting the valley in shades of gray and white. Mist hung low over the frozen grass, thick enough to hide anything moving within it. Silas stood on the porch with a cup of coffee in his hand, steam curling upward. His eyes swept the horizon in a slow, methodical pattern. West to east, east to west. The way he had learned to scan for enemies during the war. Movement caught his attention. West Ridge, 4 shapes emerging from the mist like ghosts. He set the coffee down and picked up the Winchester. The riders stopped at the crest of the hill, just beyond accurate rifle range. 250 yards, maybe more. Smart. They knew he was armed. The leader sat tall on a gray horse. Even from this distance, Silas could see the white bandage wrapped around his chest. Red Hawk, the one Kaya had stabbed. "White man," Red Hawk shouted, his English rough but clear. "The woman is ours. Give her, you live." Silas didn't answer with words. He raised the Winchester, sighted carefully, and fired. The bullet struck the ground 3 feet in front of Red Hawk's horse. Dirt and snow exploded upward. The horse screamed and reared, nearly throwing its rider. Message delivered. Red Hawk steadied his mount and shouted something in Apache. The 4 riders spread out, circling wide, taking positions around the cabin while staying beyond rifle range. Silas stepped back inside. Kaya stood in the corner, fully awake, the Bowie knife he had given her gripped in her hand. "They're not attacking," she said. "They're waiting. They know I have guns. They'll try to outlast me. Or wait for more men." Silas nodded. She understood warfare. That was good. The first day passed in tense silence. The Apache riders maintained their distance, watching, circling,
This is gonna
never
hurt.
coming close enough to engage.
Just do it. I can handle
They
it.
were patient.
How far away
Silas
are
had
they?
to give them that.
Half a day, 4
As
people.
afternoon shadows lengthened, he noticed something troubling. The riders moved with too much certainty. One group always positioned themselves north of the cabin, where a blind spot existed near the woodpile. Another group watched the back door, the only secondary exit. They knew the layout. Silas thought back 3 days. Jenkins, the horse trader from town, had stopped by wanting to buy his spare mare. Silas had led him inside for coffee while they negotiated. Jenkins had wandered around the cabin, asking casual questions, looking at everything. Now it made sense. Word traveled fast on the frontier. Apache warriors asking questions in town, offering gold for information about a runaway woman. Jenkins was the kind of man who would sell his own mother for the right price. The snake had drawn a map of the cabin and traded it for whatever Stone Bear was paying. Silas filed that knowledge away. If he survived this, Jenkins would answer for it. The first real attack came at 3 in the morning on the second night. An arrow punched through the north window and embedded itself in the wall 6 inches from Silas's head. He had been expecting it, positioned away from the obvious sightlines. He fired back through the shattered glass. A cry of pain echoed in the darkness. Seconds later, a shape appeared at the south window. Kaya reacted faster than Silas could have hoped. She threw the Bowie knife with a smooth, practiced motion. The blade caught the warrior in the shoulder, spinning him backward out of the window frame. Red Hawk's voice rang out in the night, calling retreat. The sounds of movement faded into the darkness. Silas checked his ammunition. 165 rounds remaining. Day 2 brought a change in tactics. The Apache didn't attack again. Instead, they settled into a siege. They stayed just beyond rifle range, watching, waiting. At night, they lit fires in a wide circle around the cabin, bright enough to prevent anyone from sleeping soundly. Silas and Kaya took turns on watch. 2 hours of sleep, 4 hours awake. The rhythm of survival. Water in the cabin would last 3 days. Food for 4. Ammunition was not the problem. Time was. "He's waiting for Stone Bear," Kaya said on the afternoon of the second day. "How many men does Stone Bear command?" "When I left, maybe 20 warriors. Now, after I wounded Red Hawk, after I shamed them by escaping," she shook her head, "he will bring everyone who can ride." The math was simple. If Stone Bear arrived with reinforcements, Silas and Kaya would die. Not might die. Would die. That night, Silas made his decision. "You need to run," he told her. Kaya looked at him like he had lost his mind. "They'll catch me within an hour. Not if you go in full darkness, not if I create a diversion." He spread a rough map on the table, scratched lines representing the terrain he knew by heart. 7 miles east, there's a ranch. Ezra Whitmore. We served together in the war. Cavalry. He pulled me out of a creek bed at Chickamauga when I took a bullet in the leg. I did the same for him at Missionary Ridge. He paused, making sure she understood the weight of what he was saying. Ezra has 5 men working for him. All of them fought in the war. All of them can shoot straight. If you reach him and tell him Silas Crenshaw needs help, he'll come. You trust him that much? I trust him with my life. Already have. More than once, she asked. Kaya studied the map, tracing the route with her finger. And what about you? I hold them here. Keep their attention on this cabin. They'll kill you before I'm halfway there. Maybe. Silas met her eyes without flinching. But if we both stay, we both die for certain. This way, one of us survives. Maybe both if you're fast enough and Ezra rides hard. Kaya was silent for a long time. The fire crackled. Wind pressed against the walls. My father died protecting me, she said quietly. I won't let another man die the same way. I'm not dying for you, Silas replied, his voice flat. I'm making a choice. There's a difference. She studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she found made her finally nod. When? Tonight.
They're
2
not
hours
attacking,
past
but they're
midnight.
waiting.
No
Waiting
move.
for us to make a mistake.
The darkness
or
was
waiting for more people
absolute
to
when
arrive.
Kaya slipped
If
out the back
reinforcements
window.
arrive, we'll be surrounded.
Silas had spent the previous hour making noise at the front of the cabin, shouting as if in argument, banging pots against the stove, anything to draw attention forward while she disappeared into the blackness behind. She moved like smoke, silent, careful, the skills of a lifetime in wild country. 10 minutes passed, 15. Silas allowed himself to hope. Then a shout split the night. Eastern Ridge. They had spotted her. Silas didn't hesitate. He opened fire toward the sound, not aiming to kill, just creating chaos. Muzzle flash lit up the darkness. Bullets cracked through the cold air. Return fire came fast. An arrow punched through the window frame and sliced across his left bicep. Hot pain bloomed. He ignored it, kept shooting, kept drawing their attention. 5 more shots. 10. The sounds of pursuit faded eastward. They were chasing her, not fighting him. He had bought her time. Whether it was enough, only dawn would tell. The sun rose on the 4th day to reveal Silas's worst fears. 14 new riders crested the western ridge, joining Red Hawk's remaining men. At their head rode a figure that needed no introduction. Stone Bear. He was massive, broad-shouldered, with a scar that ran from his forehead to his jaw like a lightning bolt frozen in flesh. His eyes were black and empty, the eyes of a man who had killed so many times that death meant nothing to him. 15 warriors now surrounded the cabin. Silas had 98 rounds remaining. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Stone Bear rode forward, stopping at 150 yards, within rifle range, but he showed no fear. A chief did not fear death. A chief walked toward it with his eyes open. "White man!" His voice was deep, commanding, his English surprisingly clear. "The woman escaped, but you did not. Come out now, I kill you fast. Make me wait, I kill you slow." Silas checked his Colt. 6 rounds, enough for 5 enemies and 1 for himself if it came to that. He was about to step onto the porch to meet whatever came with his eyes open when he heard something that changed everything. Gunfire. From the east, multiple rifles firing in rapid succession. He rushed to the window. Riders poured over the eastern ridge, 7 of them moving fast, Winchesters blazing. At their head rode a man with a white beard and a cavalry saber strapped to his saddle, Ezra Whitmore. Older now, but still sitting a horse like he was born in the saddle. And behind them on a brown mare rode Kaya. She had made it. She had come back. Stone Bear wheeled his horse, shock breaking through his stone face for the first time. He barked orders in Apache, splitting his forces. 8 warriors turned to face Ezra's charge. The rest maintained positions around the cabin. Silas kicked open the front door and stepped into the chaos. The battle unfolded in fragments of violence. Silas came off the porch firing. 2 warriors had turned their backs to watch Ezra's approach. Fatal mistake. The Winchester barked twice in quick succession. Both men fell from their horses before they knew death had found them. A 3rd warrior charged directly at him, tomahawk raised high, screaming a war cry that echoed off the hills. Silas worked the lever, but the rifle jammed. Metal scraped on metal. Nothing. He threw the Winchester aside and drew the Colt. The warrior was 15 feet away, closing fast. Silas fired. Shoulder hit. The man stumbled but kept coming, momentum carrying him forward. Silas fired again. Chest. The warrior collapsed 3 feet from the porch steps. Tomahawk still clutched in his dead hand. Red Hawk appeared from nowhere, leaping from his horse with a scream of pure hatred.
They'll catch me in an hour.
You took her from us.
I don't want you to die in my place.
He hit Silas at full speed, and both men went down hard in the frozen dirt. Red Hawk's knife flashed in the morning light. Silas caught his wrist with both hands, barely stopping the blade inches from his throat. They rolled across the ground, grappling, each fighting for the killing advantage. Red Hawk was younger, stronger. His wound had healed enough to give him power that Silas couldn't match. But Silas was older, more experienced. He had fought in battles where thousands died. He had survived things that would have broken lesser men. He drove his knee into Red Hawk's stomach with all the force he could muster. The warrior's grip loosened for half a second. Silas twisted hard, reversed their positions, and slammed his elbow into Red Hawk's face. Bone crunched, blood sprayed across the dirt. Silas drew his Bowie knife and pressed the cold steel against Red Hawk's throat. "Yield," he said. Red Hawk spat blood in his face. "Kill me. I will see you in hell." Silas wiped his cheek slowly with his free hand. He could end it now. One quick motion across the throat. Justice for Kaya's father. Justice for the days of siege and fear. But something stayed his hand. "No," he said. "You're going to live. You're going to ride back and tell your people what happened here. How 15 warriors couldn't take one cabin. How Stone Bear died chasing a woman who was smarter than all of you combined." He leaned closer, making sure Red Hawk heard every word. "That shame will burn worse than any wound I could give you." The hatred in Red Hawk's eyes told Silas he was right. Stone Bear stood alone in the center of the battlefield. Around him lay the bodies of his warriors. 8 dead, 5 wounded too badly to fight. Ezra had lost 2 men, including young Thomas, barely 22 years old, shot through the chest in the initial charge. But the numbers no longer mattered. The battle was decided. Everyone knew it except Stone Bear. Silas approached him slowly, Colt reloaded and ready. The Apache chief made no move to flee. Flight would mean dishonor. A chief faced death standing. They stopped 10 feet apart. Two men, one young enough to still have years ahead, one old enough to know those years meant nothing without honor. "You fight well, white man," Stone Bear said. His voice carried no anger now, only a kind of grim respect. "But this was not your war. It became my war the moment you started it." Stone Bear's eyes moved to Kaya, who stood near Ezra's horse with her knife drawn. Something passed across his scarred face. Not regret, something closer to confusion. "She killed my honor," he said. "She wounded my blood. She must pay." "Her father already paid, with his life. That debt is settled." "No," Stone Bear shook his head slowly. "Blood demands blood. It is our way. It has always been our way." "Then take mine." Stone Bear studied him for a long moment. "You would die for her?" Silas met his gaze without flinching. "I would kill for her. There's a difference." Silence stretched between them. Stone Bear looked around at the carnage, at his fallen warriors, at Red Hawk being held at gunpoint by one of Ezra's men. Everything he had built lay broken in the dirt, but a chief did not surrender. A chief fought until he could not fight anymore. Stone Bear drew his knife. The blade was long, curved, stained with old blood. He had killed many men with that knife. It had never failed him. He charged with speed that belied his 54 years. The knife slashed in a wide arc aimed at Silas's throat. Silas stepped back and fired. The first bullet caught Stone Bear in the shoulder. He staggered sideways but didn't stop. His legs kept moving, carrying him forward through sheer force of will. The second bullet hit his stomach. He slowed, his steps becoming unsteady, but the knife stayed raised. The third bullet struck his chest. Stone Bear fell to his knees 3 feet from where Silas stood. The knife dropped from his fingers into the dirt. Blood spread across his deerskin shirt in a dark, widening stain. He looked up at Silas with eyes that were already dimming, already seeing something beyond this world. "She is not worth this much blood," he whispered. Silas looked down at him without pity, without hatred. Just the cold clarity of a man who had seen too much death to be moved by one more. "That's where you're wrong." Stone Bear's eyes closed. His body slumped forward into the frozen ground. The valley fell silent. They buried Thomas and the other fallen man that afternoon on a small rise overlooking the valley. Ezra spoke words from memory, something about dust returning to dust, about souls finding peace. The other men stood with hats pressed against their chests, faces grim with the weight of loss. The surviving Apache warriors were allowed to collect their dead and wounded. Silas made that decision over Ezra's objections. "They know they lost," Silas said. "Making them crawl home without their chief sends a stronger message than killing every last one." Red Hawk was the last to leave. He sat on his horse at the edge of the property, blood still drying on his face from where Silas had broken his nose. His eyes burned with a hatred that would take years to fade if it ever did. "This is not over," he said. "For you, maybe." Silas's voice carried no threat, only exhaustion. "For me, it ended today." Kaya stepped forward. She spoke first in Apache, words Silas didn't understand, then translated for everyone to hear. "Tell the tribe that Kaya, daughter of Running Deer, is dead. The woman standing here belongs to no one. Not to Stone Bear's memory, not to the tribe, not to any man who thinks he can claim her like property." Red Hawk's jaw tightened. For a moment, Silas thought he might do something stupid. But the fight had gone out of him, at least for now. He turned his horse and rode away without looking back. The other survivors followed, carrying their dead across their saddles. Silas watched until they disappeared over the ridge. Only then did he let himself breathe. 2 weeks passed. The cabin bore new scars now. Bullet holes patched with fresh wood. A replaced window covered with oiled paper until glass could be brought from town. The porch rail where Red Hawk's tomahawk had buried itself during the siege, now cut away and rebuilt. Silas stood on that porch in the early morning light, coffee steaming in his hands, watching Kaya work in the corral. She was brushing down the horses, her movements confident and sure. She had learned fast: ranch work, riding, shooting. She picked up everything he taught her like she had been waiting her whole life for someone to give her the chance. Ezra rode up around midday, his horse's breath clouding in the cold air. He accepted the coffee Silas offered and drank it standing, the way soldiers did. "Heard news from the trading post," he said. "Stone Bear's death split the band. Half went north to Montana territory. Rest joined the reservation near Fort Laramie. And Red Hawk? Went north with the others, far as anyone can tell." Silas nodded slowly. The threat wasn't gone. A man like Red Hawk didn't forget, didn't forgive. But for now, there was peace. After Ezra left, Silas and Kaya sat on the porch watching the sun drop toward the western mountains. The sky turned colors that had no names, shades of orange and red and purple that made the whole world look like it was burning. "What happens now?" Kaya asked. "Winter's coming. Plenty of work to do before the first real snow hits." "That's not what I meant." Silas was quiet for a long moment. He had never been good with words about feelings. Not before the war, certainly not after. He could give orders, make plans, state facts, but this was different. "You earned your place here," he finally said. "That's what matters." Kaya turned to look at him. "And later?" "Later comes when it comes." She nodded slowly. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a declaration of anything. But it was honest. And Kaya had learned to value honesty above almost everything else. "I want to stay," she said. "Not because I owe you a debt. Not because I have nowhere else to go. Because this place feels like it could become home. Real home." Silas looked out at the land stretching before them. The same land he had worked alone for 7 years. The same cabin where he had buried his grief and his memories and whatever hope he once had for the future. "Then stay," he said. That night, Silas cleaned his Winchester by lamplight while Kaya sharpened her Bowie knife near the fire. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Some silences were empty. This one was full. Before bed, he loaded the rifle and set it beside the door. She checked the latch on the back window. Old habits, necessary habits. The frontier didn't forgive those who let their guard down. "You think Red Hawk will come back?" she asked. "Someday. Men like him don't forget." "Neither do I." Silas looked at her then, really looked. This woman who had crawled to his door half dead and desperate, who had fought beside him without flinching, who had run 7 miles through hostile territory to bring help when she could have kept running and never looked back. She wasn't the same woman who had collapsed across his threshold 2 weeks ago. That woman had been running from something. This woman was standing towards something. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow we start reinforcing the north fence. Going to be a long day." She smiled, just barely, just enough. "Always more work." "Ways." She moved toward the bed he had given up for her without being asked. He would sleep in the chair near the stove, same as he had every night since she arrived. It wasn't uncomfortable. He had slept in worse places during the war. "Silas," he looked up from the rifle. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." He nodded once, the way he always did when words failed him. Outside, snow began to fall, the first flakes of what promised to be a long, hard winter. Inside, the fire crackled, the rifle stood ready, and 2 survivors shared a silence that felt like something neither of them had expected to find again. Peace, not the peace of safety. The frontier never offered that. But the peace of knowing you weren't facing the darkness alone. The wind whispered against the cabin walls. Snow gathered on the windowsill. Stars emerged in the black sky overhead, cold and countless. And somewhere far to the north, beyond the mountains, Red Hawk rode through the night with revenge burning in his heart. The frontier never promised that trouble wouldn't come. It only promised another dawn for those strong enough to fight for it. The end. The valley settled into winter's grip. Snow covered the graves on the hillside, the blood on the battlefield, the tracks of those who had come and gone. But Silas Crenshaw knew one truth about this land. Peace was always borrowed, never owned. Somewhere out there, enemies waited. They always waited. The only question was never if trouble would return, only when.
The story illustrates the greatest lesson. Courage and the right choices at the right time can change the fate of both individuals. The male protagonist, who once lived in solitude and regretted not being able to protect his family, chose to help the female protagonist in her despair instead of turning his back. The female protagonist didn't just run away. She dared to fight and returned to rescue her family, proving that strength isn't about not being afraid, but about moving forward despite fear. Furthermore, the story reminds us that faith and teamwork are what help people survive adversity. Ultimately, peace isn't about the absence of danger, but about having someone to face it with.